When he pulled off his shirt and revealed a body covered in scars, the cops felt their skin crawl. The deputy grabbed a baton and started beating him, then blasted him down with a high-pressure hose. Looking at the state of him, the cops just sneered. But what they didn't know was that this time, they'd picked a fight with the wrong man. His name was Rocky. No, wait, his name was Rambo. He'd just come home from the Vietnam War. On the battlefield, he was a perfect war machine. But now, he was drifting from town to town looking for work. He passed through a small town and thought he'd stop in for a meal, but the town sheriff blocked him at the edge of town. He had no patience for drifters like this. To get him out of his town, the sheriff offered him a ride. On the way, the sheriff hurled insult after insult at Rambo, telling him he'd only bring trouble. Before long, he dropped Rambo off past the town line and forced him out of the car. Then came the warning, "Don't come back." Rambo said nothing. Once the sheriff drove off, he hesitated, then turned around and walked back toward town anyway. The sheriff spotted him in the rearview mirror and immediately swung around after him.
All right, you're under arrest. You hear me? Now put your hands on the car. Now you put your hands on the car and you spread them. Now you're gonna put your hands on that car. How you do it, you decide, right now.
Rambo knew he'd done nothing wrong, but he put his hands on the roof of the car anyway. The sheriff found a combat knife on him. Rambo explained it was for hunting, but the sheriff hauled him down to the station regardless. The sheriff confiscated his knife and marched him into the interrogation room. When asked for his name, something flickered behind Rambo's eyes. He wasn't afraid of the cops. It was the window in front of him. It dragged him back to the POW camp. One of the deputies tried to take his dog tags.
Hey, you got 3 seconds before I break your face in.
Rambo knew better than to fight a battle he couldn't win. Only then did the deputy realize he was a Vietnam vet. But at that time, anti-war sentiment in America was at its peak. War heroes got no respect. And Rambo being a soldier was a direct challenge to the sheriff's authority. They dragged Rambo into a cell and worked him over, then hit him with a high-pressure hose. The deputy pinned him down and ordered the others to shave his head. Rambo was terrified. That blade coming toward him threw him right back into the POW camp, and he couldn't hold the rage in any longer. The sheriff came rushing down the stairs. Rambo launched him across the room with both feet. Another officer charged in and went down just as fast. Then, Rambo grabbed his knife and made a break for the exit. Once outside, he yanked a passing motorcyclist off his bike, gunned the throttle, and was gone. The sheriff was no pushover either. He jumped in his cruiser and gave chase. Rambo and the bike moved as one, sailing over a railroad crossing. The sheriff floored it, tearing after him like he was playing Grand Theft Auto. Seeing the sheriff wouldn't back off, Rambo turned onto a gravel road, hoping the rough terrain would shake him. But the sheriff wasn't giving up, so Rambo cut into the woods, using the dirt bike's advantage to lose the cruiser. Sure enough, the car got stuck at the tree line. The sheriff called for backup, then got back behind the wheel and kept coming. Rambo had barely cleared the mud track when the sheriff came around the other side to cut him off. Rambo glanced back at the cruiser, then accelerated over the ridge and disappeared. The sheriff couldn't brake in time and went straight down the slope. Rambo tore away on the bike, but the road ran out ahead of him. He ditched the bike and ran for the forest. With his conditioning, he vanished into the trees within minutes. Realizing Rambo was gone, the sheriff was furious. He swore he'd find him and make him pay. Deep in the forest, Rambo found an abandoned mine. He scavenged what he could, found an old scrap of tarp, and cut it down with his knife, fashioning a crude shirt. Then he kept moving. Meanwhile, the sheriff's backup had arrived. By now, Rambo had lost his bearings. He pulled a compass from the handle of his knife. Just then, dogs started barking below. The search party was closing in. Rambo couldn't afford to stop. He climbed hard for the ridgeline. When he reached the top, he found a sheer drop waiting for him. Worse, the sheriff and his men were right behind him. With no other choice, he started climbing down the cliff face. He nearly fell more than once, but his upper body strength was extraordinary, and he caught the rock each time. Then it got worse. A helicopter came sweeping up the canyon, and in the cabin sat the deputy. Rambo saw it closing in, and scrambled for a way out. By then, the deputy already had his rifle up, but the air currents in the canyon were unstable, so the first shot went wide. By now, Rambo knew exactly how much trouble he was in, and just as the deputy lined up his second shot, Rambo let go and jumped. The deputy still wouldn't quit. He kept firing round after round. Rambo, pinned behind a tree, couldn't understand it. Why were they pushing him this hard? He picked up a rock, and while the deputy was reloading, hurled it at the helicopter. The pilot flinched away on instinct, the chopper lurched, and the deputy fell out. Rambo moved in fast to check. The deputy was already dead. He took the man's weapon and his jacket, and disappeared. The sheriff and his men arrived moments later, and it finally hit him. He'd picked a fight with the wrong man. By then, Rambo had taken cover behind a boulder. He patched up his wounds, then stepped out on his own to make peace. He wanted this to end right here. But the sheriff opened fire without warning, and Rambo had no choice but to run. Just then, the station came back with a file on Rambo. It showed that Rambo wasn't just a Vietnam vet. He was Special Forces. He'd been awarded the Medal of Honor. He was a war hero. The sheriff hesitated for a beat, then ordered the manhunt to continue anyway. But here's Here's what he didn't know. Rambo was already prepared. He'd sharpened branches into stakes, and was waiting for them to come to him. The search team fanned out through the woods, a pitch-black forest, thick with the smell of death. The instant lightning lit up the trees, the dogs went wild. 2 of them broke loose and charged. 2 shots rang out in the dark. Neither dog came back. 1 officer was creeping forward, searching, with no idea that Rambo was directly beneath his feet. Another officer heard the screams, and rushed in. Rambo took him down before he could react. And here's the thing, Rambo never went for the kill. When a third man arrived, Rambo appeared in a flash of lightning, then vanished just as fast. The officer fired and hit his own man. Thinking he'd hit Rambo, he ran over to check.
Somebody help me!
The sheriff heard the calls for help, and came running. He never noticed that the man behind him had been taken. Only when he reached the trapped officer did he remember the man who'd been following him. He turned to look, and found him tied to a tree. He moved in to cut him loose, and Rambo dropped on him out of nowhere, pinning him down.
I could have killed them all. I could have killed you. I'm telling you the law. Not you, it's me.
Rambo gave him a warning. Stop pushing me. Let this end here. The sheriff broke down and wept, but he still wasn't finished. The next morning, he set up a command post at the edge of the forest, with state troopers pouring in. The news picked it up. A vet had torn a police station apart, and the whole country was watching. But nobody asked what had been done to Rambo. If the sheriff hadn't pushed him, would he ever have fought back? To keep the situation from spiraling, the Department of Defense sent in a colonel. This man was Rambo's commanding officer, the one who'd trained him into an elite operator. To end the standoff fast, the colonel made a proposal. Let Rambo go. Let him walk out of the woods, and take him later, on their terms.
Are you telling me that 200 men against your boy is a no-win situation for us?
You send that many, don't forget one thing.
What?
A good supply of body bags.
The sheriff broke into a cold sweat listening to this, but he wasn't calling off the hunt. He told the colonel to raise Rambo on the radio. If the colonel could get him talking, they could triangulate his position. The colonel didn't care one way or the other, because he knew that against a man like Rambo, numbers wouldn't matter. The colonel called out to him over the radio, the way he would at a roll call, and Rambo was resting in a cave.
Cover leader calling Raven.
The words dropped him straight back into Vietnam. He hesitated, then keyed the mic.
They're all gone, sir.
It's him. Get on it. Rambo, are you all right? Over.
Baker team, they're all dead, sir.
The colonel didn't know how to comfort him, so he talked about the men they'd served with, appealing to him, soldier, to surrender. Rambo trusted the colonel. He just didn't trust the world anymore.
They drew first blood.
When he was done talking, Rambo shut off the radio, and the techs had already fixed his position. The sheriff made his promise. At first light, every man goes up that mountain. Early the next morning, the National Guard moved into the valley and began sweeping it. Rambo saw them coming, and made a run for the mine, but a soldier caught sight of him. The squad leader pulled out a rocket launcher, and prepared to bring the mine down.
Give that man a cigar! Bullseye!
Soon after, the sheriff and the colonel arrived. Everyone agreed, Rambo was dead. Only the colonel was smiling, because he'd seen this coming. He knew Rambo better than anyone, and he was right. Rambo had survived inside the mine. He lit a strip of cloth and wrapped it around his knife. After searching around, he found half a drum of fuel. He stripped off his jacket, tore it into strips, soaked them in fuel, and made torches. Then he went looking for a way out. Before long, he found an escape shaft. By now, one thing was on Rambo's mind, payback. Outside the mine, he saw the army pulling out. He jumped onto the roof of the last truck, climbed into the cab, shoved the driver out, and drove straight for town. Word reached the station fast. Rambo was alive. The sheriff gave the order, set up a roadblock at the bridge. Rambo drove the truck into a gas station. One massive explosion later, the station was a wall of fire. The cops heard the blast, and scrambled to respond. The sheriff knew Rambo was coming for him, so he holed up on the roof. Rambo reached the station, and cut the power first, plunging the whole town into darkness. Then he broke into a store, laid a trail of gunpowder as a fuse, and with one enormous blast, leveled the building. The sheriff could only watch, but what he didn't know was that his position had been made a long time ago. Up on that roof, he was jumping at every sound, and it finally sank in. This drifter could burn the entire town to the ground. The sheriff moved fast. He figured that if he could just get Rambo inside the station, he still had a chance. The sheriff was hit and fell. Rambo lined up the kill shot, and the colonel appeared and stopped him. If he pulled that trigger, his life was over. By now, police had the building surrounded. The colonel went to the window. There were at least 200 officers outside. He knew that if a firefight started, Rambo was finished.
It's over, Johnny. It's over!
Nothing is over! Nothing!
And Rambo finally broke. Everything he'd swallowed came pouring out. On the battlefield, he gave everything he had for his country. And when he came home, he was shut out at every turn. He couldn't even get a job. He described what happened when he landed. The humiliation at the airport, protesters spitting on him. His scream carried all the grief he'd never let out. "We loved our country. Our country should love us back." That line speaks for a whole generation of veterans. The colonel just listened. He didn't interrupt, because he understood that this was the first time Rambo had ever said any of it out loud. Rambo collapsed into his colonel's arms, crying like a child. And at the end of it all, the colonel walked him out and turned him over to the police, and the war was finally over.